10 minutes of questions too.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you guys here for the session incorporating PR assignments into non-PR specific courses. Just a couple announcements before we get started. Just so you know, we do have the Mimic boot camps going on today. That's going to be a little bit later this afternoon, so definitely register for those. And then also, just a quick reminder of our giveaway that we have going on. We're going to be doing some gift card giveaways for people who are engaged throughout the chat. So definitely feel free, jump into the chat, ask questions, and at the end, we're going to have Jamie and Alisa answer some of those questions for you guys. So it's my pleasure to come and introduce Jamie and Alisa, just to give you a little bit of background about them. So Jamie Ward is an associate professor of public relations at Eastern Michigan University and is faculty advisor of the EMU Public Relations Society of America and of the Eleanor Wright chapter. Prior to entering academia, Jamie has spent over a decade in nonprofit sectors working to help nonprofit organizations advance their cause through strategic public relations. Her background includes strategic development, branding, and storytelling for advocacy and engagement. As an avid researcher and writer, Jamie is a contributor to PR News and a public relations journal, as well as peer-reviewed several PR journals. Jamie is a co-author of the following textbooks: A Practical Guide to Ethics and Public Relations and Veteran Relationships Across Lifetimes, Brothers and Sisters in Arms. She's also co-authoring a book with Alisa for an introduction to PR currently. Alisa Agozzino is an associate professor of public relations at Ohio University. Dr. Aggie teaches a variety of classes, including Introduction to Public Relations Writing, Principles of Social Media, Public Relations Research, and Public Relations Campaigns. Her research relies mostly in social media tools within the public relations field. Her current research agenda examines how social media impacts different industries, from nonprofits to administrative offices to public relations professionals. Dr. Aggie is exploring how to use social media tools are doing so effectively to reach her target audience in order to build and maintain mutual benefits relationships. She currently is working with Jamie Ward to publish an introductory PR textbook with Stukin, scheduled to release in late of 2020. Professionally, she's involved in serving a variety of different regional and national offices, including ONU's PRSSA advisor. Dr. Aggie serves on the National PRSSA National Advisor, a board member of the Ohio Central PRSA, and the chair of the National PRSA Educators Academia session. So really excited to hear from both these ladies today. So we'll go ahead and we'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you all for attending our session. I know it's hard to pick a certain session during these breakouts because they're all so good. I know that even when I see the others that we were kind of timed and pinned up against, I was like, oh my goodness, like I need the recording because I want to go to someone else's. So we thank you for coming and choosing ours to sit in this afternoon. And we're excited to be here. As Brad said, we're working together on an intro book with Stu Kent, which has been super exciting. We'll talk just briefly about it at the end. But we're here today to talk to you more about incorporating some of these PR assignments into those non-classes. So if you teach PR, great, that's fantastic. I kind of asked in the chat box, just curious what you all taught, but you know, we don't always teach a PR line. A lot of times public relations is tied into a host of different classes. And so the goal today was to try to just give you some tidbits and some assignments of what we do in some of our classes that work well, and that we've been doing for some time, and also that we have learned during this online transition to online that work well in those types of classes as well. So we're hoping that you take away something, and that you're excited to take away some of these things, and you can incorporate some of these ideas into your own classes. And I know if you're like me, you take all these notes and you think how you get fired up. I am always so fired up at the end of this. And then, if I use one of these ideas at the end, I'm like, that was a win, right? I'd like to incorporate everything that everyone's been teaching in these courses. It's just been fantastic. And thanks to StuKent for this awesome conference, because this is our first. I think it's only their second year of doing it, but I think this has been a true, just a true blessing as far as getting great ideas and things that are tangible and can be incorporated into classes. Public relations is evolving, and it's constantly moving. It's constantly this carrot that we're chasing to try to teach you best practices and teach our students best practices of how to best practice in this industry that's just constantly moving. And I think, a lot of many professors have heard of public relations. If you don't teach it, I'm talking because the session's kind of geared towards if you don't teach PR specifically in your curriculum. A lot of professors know it exists, know that it's important, would like to tie it in, but not really sure of best practices and constantly keeping abreast of what best practices is to give to our students and to teach our students. So, and it's hard. It's really hard to teach or to attract a 17, 18-year-old who, comes to school to learn a particular practice. It's not like teaching. It's not even like pharmacy or engineering or something that they know exactly what that job is when they get out. That's what they're going to be. PR is one of those slippery things that we have a tough time as an industry trying to explain efficiently to that younger generation exactly what we do, because it's just, like I said, it's always evolving, it's always changing, and there's so many different ways to go with the industry. So what we like is that I don't know how, I know StuKent works with a lot of high school teachers, and I haven't been able to read and talk at the same time. I'm not that great in the chat box, but I know they work a lot with high school teachers. So just a little plug that the PRSSA has an entire, that's kind of like AMA for PR, and it's their student association, and they have a whole board member and a whole section that's actually dedicated to high school outreach and trying to get to high school students to explain and to teach them about public relations. So if that's something, the area that you're in, and you teach those high school classes and you're trying to incorporate them in there, I would love to talk to you more and connect you to the right folks at headquarters to talk more about that high school reach and that program that we've built in PRSSA to do that more effectively. So if you qualify for that, I'd love to reach out and talk to you more about that. Just some background about my experience. I see when I first put the question up there, some of you said you work in broadcasting or comms, some work in marketing, some work in consumer behavior, those types of things. And as for me personally, I started in arts and sciences, and have sat in the arts and sciences college under the communication and multimedia journalism major for the last 13 years. Starting June 1 of 2020, we are officially moved to the business college, and now my colleagues are all, finance and accountants and the marketing and consumer behavior and management folks. So I've seen over the years this collaboration, and it's really tough because at Ohio Northern, you can dual major in public relations and marketing, but before this year, you were crossing colleges. So that was a lot more difficult. You had to pick a primary major and then major in that particular, and then you got to pick a secondary degree, because when you flopped over to arts and sciences, when we were over in that side, you couldn't get a dual major within the same college. Super confusing, doesn't matter. The point is we had a lot of people from the outside taking our courses or wanting to incorporate more public relations into the curriculum. So our goal is today, to give you some of those assignments that we've asked our students. Jamie and I went back to our students and kind of asked them, like, what did you guys, from the outside looking in, not a PR major, but if you're a marketing major or a broadcasting major or whatever, and you've taken our PR classes, what assignment did you do that you thought, wow, like I would be lost without that? And the first one that they responded, I'm going to do brochures and podcasting. Jamie's going to do some others, but starting with brochures was one of the ones that they said, Aggie, that's one of those classes or one of those assignments that it was like really a brochure I know nothing about. Did I start with podcasting? Sorry, Jamie. That was one of those assignments that I knew nothing about. I know writing. I had English 101 and 102, right? But I've never learned in depth about AP writing, which is in our field in public relations. That's just one of those things when you're not writing for what I call academic weenie things. A lot of times we're writing for the media. So we're writing in Associated Press style, which is very different. So sidebar, in all of Aggie's classes, they call me Aggie because Alisa Agozzino is just too tough to say apparently. And I get called Alicia or Alisa or Agozzino or, no one can pronounce any of that. So Aggie, so that's who I'm talking about myself. And they were like, you know what, when we do an Aggie class, we have to learn AP style writing. And I'm like, absolutely. And so weekly they get an AP style test, and it's just 10 questions. I do put them on a time limit. I only give them 10 minutes, but I do allow them to use the online resource. And just for all you teachers, I don't tell them this, but AP actually has AP quizzes on their website. I think it's like $6 or something stupid. And they have like 90 quizzes already built for you on the AP website. So I test those students with taking those AP quizzes every week, and they're timed so they learned quickly how to look up and what they should be looking up as far as answers and finding those mistakes in AP in their work. But they don't come in with that expertise, and that's something that we wanted. The brochure assignment kind of brings to light the writing portion of that. And then the other part is the graphic. And we have a graphic design major. We have, an art major. But that's not really their, passion. That's not where they want to go. So this kind of encompasses both of those skills into one assignment. And basically, it's a big chunk. Most of the writing assignments in different classes are 50 points, depending on the class. The brochure assignment is 100. So I put a little bit more time into the front end of this assignment, working with students and asking them to come up with a topic or a business, an organization. It can be at home, it can be on campus, but somewhere that they can go and offer their expertise to help write a brochure based on that organization or that business's needs. It does two things. First of all, it gets them out in our community and talking to folks, which of course is at the heart of PR, right? Building those relationships. But it also gives them an opportunity to do something that what I would call not busy work, right? It's something that they can do, and it can be fruitful at the end for both parties. So I think too, when they find someone that wants to work with them on this project, an organization that's willing to have them design this for them, it puts a little more, I hope not stress, but a little more pressure to put their best foot forward and to do higher quality work. Because they know that it's actually going to be used. So it makes that connection. It bridges the academia side to the practice side, which is another thing that we like to incorporate. And I have it set up that you can do it. You could do it a variety of ways. I have it set up that it's introduced almost a month before it's due, to give them time to find the client, to give them time to seek approval on after they come up with it, but then also do a rough draft. And I think a lot of times in any type of writing type of assignment, this is as a professor, I hate the extra work on my end to review a rough draft, but it's kind of nice on their end to get some feedback early in the process, in that writing process. So I do have it in steps, the rough draft, just any of the writing. And it basically, I look at it for the AP correctedness of it. And for any of you that aren't familiar also with AP and want additional help, there's an awesome app called Style Guard. And it's on your AP website. And it is kind of pricey. I want to say it's around $60 to $80 for this, but it's basically an app that I could run all of my writing work for AP mistakes through, and it will pull up and let me correct their versions in AP style and look like I'm correcting them, not AP style is correcting them, which is wonderful. So that's another cheat that I use a lot. And if they find it, great. And if you want to share it with your students, great. I don't share it with my students. If they find it on the website and they run all their work through it, great for them. But it is an additional cost on their end. And it's just a time saver on my end. So back to the writing, it gives them that practice. And it also gives them some feedback on that AP style, the content part of that. The second draft is more of the graphic side of things. I don't make them do it in a particular program. A lot of them do it in Word, which is fine. I mean, Word's not the sexiest template that you can get for a brochure. I do make them have a 6-panel that you have to fold. And I also tell them to be mindful of like bleeds and if you print it off and I fold it, is it exactly the same 3 panels so it folds correctly type of things. I used to ask that they print it off in full color this spring. I did not have that option. I had to print it off on my end. But those types of things, with it being digital now, that we can also, design it, print it, hand it out at whatever, the business establishment they're at. The beauty of that is they also can put a PDF on their website and have it there as well. So that's pretty exciting for both ends, because it's just so multifunctional, and they love that. And so the final product, I do ask them to print off and give to me, but like I said, this spring didn't allow for that. So they submitted PDFs, but I don't care if they use Canva. I don't care if they use Word. I just need a finished product. So that second draft is more of the graphic side of it, to say, have you printed this off and folded it because you did it in, whatever wonderful, maybe they pick their own program to do it in. And when I printed it off, the folds are different. So even if I printed it, folded front and back, when I folded it, one panel was bigger than another or whatnot. So I asked them for that. And then the final one, of course, when they submit the final copy, I make them have approval from the organization that they have actually, they've shown it to them. All the information in it is factual, that they could actually use it. Whether or not they use it, that's not a concern of mine. It's not part of the graded rubric, which is actually on the next slide as well for you to kind of see. And I know this is super tough to see, but all this information, then, do they have a testimony? Are all the content within it correct? Did they seek approval from the business? And so you can see they don't have to do every single part of this. If they didn't seek approval from the business and they just did something on their own, they still can get a 95 out of 100 if they do everything else perfectly. So at the end, that's not the main concern. Obviously, I want them to be able to use it and use it all the time, but it's not necessarily something that they have to use. So that's my first assignment, the brochure assignment. My second assignment that I want to share with you is the podcasting assignment. And so many of the students said, Aggie, that was awesome. I dreaded that assignment. I saw it on the syllabus. Some have told me they thought about dropping the class because they couldn't even imagine doing a podcast. It would just be so intense. As I said before, when I started this in this class, we were in the arts or in multimedia. I had all the functions. I had the podcasting equipment. We had a studio on campus that I could send them to, and I worked really closely with our multimedia folks to produce the podcast. So they had to come in and do it in studio. I found out, and this was even prior to COVID, that that's not really needed. A lot of these students have the basic tools that they need to do this podcast, and that's basically just a microphone, some type of platform or app to actually put it into, and a lot of them did it simply from like their iPhone or their laptop computer. So although we teach it in a Mac lab and have all the bells and whistles and all the software, this was an assignment that we quickly found out that you don't need all the bells and whistles, and just figuring out the basics for it were super exciting and something that the students enjoyed doing and enjoyed learning how to do. And then we've found some have actually, made series out of it and went even more fold into, doing this with other people. So it's been a fun, constantly evolving project. And the big thing here is that we, on the next slide, James, I think, is finding the host site to put it on. I don't mandate that it has to be a particular one. I ask that for this particular class, it's actually in a social media class that they come from all over campus, like principles of social media. It's a very basic class that they're learning how to podcast, but it's something within our PR field that keeps popping up and continuously popping up as something that is a different way and a better, maybe not better, but a different, and for some, a better way to connect with that target audience. And so we were trying to find a host site, something for free, because of course students don't want to pay for this function. And two favorites have been the Podbeam and SoundCloud, and both of them have been excellent resources to upload their podcasts to. Now, as long as you're not going to have a regular series and do this to make money off of and stuff like that, they can sign up for a cheap free service and just enter their email and stuff. And I'm sure they get plenty of emails from them afterwards. But it's just a place to host, because of course iTunes is ideal if you're having a regular podcast series. But for most of these students, they're just learning the skill. And so these hosting sites will host it for them, and then they can make it into a linkable URL that they can put on their blog or put on their website or something of that. As far as topics, we've asked them in this particular class to focus on PR or social media, and I asked them to interview an expert. I don't necessarily make them justify an expert in the area, which means I can get almost anything for an expert. But it could be, I've had parents before actually be on podcasts, which is quite humorous. But athletes sometimes will interview their coaches for, how they use social media within the athletics, or public relations people will interview people that they've had for internships, or a whole host of reasons. And the only stipulation, and I have a rubric for this as well on the next slide, I believe. The only stipulation that I have for this is that they write out the questions prior to, and we go over before they actually do the assignment that you might not get through all the questions. You have a 5-minute, because I have to grade them, a 5-minute limit on this podcast to do it. And so you might have 10 great questions and you get through 3 of them and you've reached your 5-minute. So make sure you kind of order those in the time that you have. And depending on who you interview, sometimes they're going to elaborate, and then the next person might give you a yes, no, and 1 sentence afterwards. So you might get through all 10 questions. So you need to be prepared and kind of have those, prepared ahead of time, and then they have to supply those to me. And then also members come across as they're credible discussing this, that this doesn't sound like they wrote the question, they have already given the person that they're interviewing all the questions, so that person's reading the answer and it sounds really canned. I want it to come off as natural as possible, but if they are bringing in outside resources or quoting some other things that they cite or discuss that relevant research. As far as the technical quality, the actual assignment sheet talks about, I don't expect you to be a multimedia journalism, awesome podcast, clean, polished. It better be professional quality or it's getting a 0. Like, I can't expect that. Most of them have never touched any of this and have no idea what they're doing. So I do ask them to have it edited and have a jingle or a clean cut at the beginning and end, kind of leading into the podcast and leading out. And we talk about that in class. As I talked about before, we still teach this in a Mac lab that's totally loaded with the Adobe suite. So they have the resources to do that. That might be something that you might have to eliminate if you don't have the resources to do the jingles and bumpers. But if you can provide that software for them, that's always a good thing to incorporate in. And then that the audio quality is good. I've heard many of them do it, which it sounds like they're in this dark tunnel interviewing someone. So we talk about like practicing and finding a room that doesn't have to be soundproof, that doesn't have a huge echo, or that you're not doing it outside so I hear all the wind noise in your microphone, those types of things. And then they are allowed, this is one of those that I allow them to pair up with one other person. So if the 2 of them want to, if they have a friend in class and they want to interview someone together, that just increases the time to the 10-minute. They have to have at least 10-minute podcast, and then that it's tagged, and the show notes are those questions that they've kind of prepared ahead of time. So those are my 2 assignments. I know I always go over. I tell Jamie I even took notes, so I would not go over my time limit. And I want to give Jamie ample amount of time, but I will come back at the end. We will have a little time for questions. So if there's something in particular that you want to know about these 2 assignments, we can answer them then.
Okay, thanks, Alisa. So the first assignment that I want to talk about today is a digitally mediated relationship assignment. Now, prior to this, I was doing a pretty standard PR practitioner interview assignment. However, I just felt like you could tell students were doing these similar types of assignments in other classes and that they were just getting bored of the very standard follow up with the practitioners, either sit down and interview them or write the questions out via email. It was very formulaic, and I was getting really formulaic responses. They were boring, they weren't engaging. The students were not putting in the time that I wanted them to put in so that they were really starting to understand the profession, so that they were really able to dig in and get good content. That just wasn't happening. They weren't getting that information. So it was just not fun. They weren't fun for me to read. They weren't fun for the students to do. So we needed to do something to jazz it up. The papers were, again, really dull. And I wanted them to start to really understand what the industry was about, what that person was doing. I wanted them to get professional knowledge, professional information. So I decided to change things up a bit. I wanted them to focus on digitally mediated relationships and really thinking about ways to express and handle those relationships. Something that could help them understand the work that goes into building relationships with other professionals in the industry, but also something that could span beyond PR. So something that could help them understand how to go about beginning to build relationships with journalists, or even potentially looking at how to build relationships with influencers. So I modeled the idea of this assignment off of what a lot of educators are doing in those educational communities. And we've talked about one with Stukent, Karen Freeberg talked about one. We've talked about lots of different educator communities. So I looked at how we're sharing information for mutual benefit and modeled this assignment off of that. So using social media, I ask students to build a relationship with a professional over the course of the semester. Now, when I say over the course of the semester, it really ends up being between 12 and 13 weeks. Once you factor in kind of that first week of just acclimating them to the course, again, it's an intro course, and ending a couple weeks early because I want them to do some follow-up. So again, it ends up being about 12 weeks or so. I have students follow a PR professional of their choosing, and I ask them to follow that professional on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, etc., and then really begin monitoring that person's content. So I encourage them to pick a person in an industry that they're interested in learning more about. That means that they could look at sports, they could look at fashion, they could look at entertainment. All of my students want to be a publicist for Beyonce, so it lets them really look at this idea of entertainment and what goes into all of that. It also forces them to do some research on that specialty area, and it forces them to identify practitioners or contributors in that space. So essentially, I'm looking for thought leaders, and I'm looking for them to start engaging with thought leaders on a level that is different than just sending them questions. I want them to think about building relationships. They cannot select a person that they know. So I'm a little more particular than Alisa in this aspect. It cannot be mom. It cannot be someone in their internship. It cannot be someone who they've had some relationship with. I want them to go beyond that and find someone that they don't know. So what I ask them to do is I ask them to like and share posts, comment on blog posts or online articles, engage in brief discussions regarding a topic of mutual interest. Where this gets tricky is students aren't comfortable with their voice. They don't feel like they have anything to contribute. So those first couple of weeks are really tricky for them because they don't know how to comment. They don't know what to say. They're uncomfortable making comments to someone that they feel is so much beyond what they know in the industry. But as time goes on and as we talk about it in class, they get more comfortable with their voice and they start to engage. They start to ask questions. They start to share some information. And that really helps in terms of that relationship. So after that 12 weeks, I have students submit a 2 to 3 page write-up discussing digitally mediated relationships. It includes snapshots of their social media streams so that I can see that they've actually made that attempt. And in that write-up, students discuss the difficulty of the assignment. 12 weeks is not a long time. So I'm asking a lot of them. I'm really asking them to jump in and try it out. But they also talk about how much they learned. They learned through listening. And I think that's something they forget. Just by paying attention to that content, they're learning a tremendous amount about the industry and that individual and the work that that person is doing. It's the similar idea to what we do in interpersonal communication, right? Listening to learn instead of listening to respond. And once students get comfortable with that, they really start to flourish and ask the right questions. So after that 2 weeks, what I do is I have them then reach out to that professional and start engaging in conversation. And that conversation I allow them to do via email or phone or through a virtual meetup, Google Hangout, Zoom, whatever platform they choose. And really just talk to that individual, conduct more of a standard type of interview. And from that, the content has improved dramatically. The questions are more pointed, they're more interesting, they actually relate to the content that the individual is producing, that the professional is producing, and the questions focus on things they're working on because they've done all of that background. So students learn a lot more about the specialty area. that they're focused on. And then they learn again about how important it is that they build relationships in this industry. Again, those same skills that can be applied to professionals, to journalists across a large spectrum. So we focus on this idea of mutual benefit and really just sharing content. So the example I have here is an example from a student who actually got a job out of this. So he really started engaging, and who he engaged with the social media director at our college. And he just started talking with her, learning more about her, about what she did. And then through the course of the semester, he decided to sit down and meet with her. And again, she gave him a position in the marketing department as a result of just building this relationship. So it really has students think about what they can gain and how they can share their content, really establishing internships or mentorships, or really just learning about the field that they're going into. The second assignment I have is a little bit different in scope. So this one addresses diversity, something I feel that we really need to talk about now, but it's crucial in the age of in PR as well. It's something that we need to build into all of our coursework. So I think it's important that we talk about diversity. I think it's important that we leave time to discuss diversity, but also that we build it into more than just intro courses. So it's a theme that needs to be built into all of our coursework. I devote a week of class time at the beginning solely to discussing diversity and really just giving them strong background. And the importance of diversity really weaves into, like I said, everything we do over the course of the semester. So I introduce them to diversity. We talk about why diversity is important, not just in terms of creating content, but throughout the entire process. Okay. And I talk to them about how it's an area in PR that professionals acknowledge the industry really needs to work on. So we talk about that too, and how important it is and how we're addressing that from an industry scale as well. I want students to really understand this needs to be an area of continual focus. So after assigning a textbook chapter on diversity, and again, depends on the intro textbook that you're using, some are better than others, we start talking about campaigns. And we discuss that while marketing or PR content fails for a number of different reasons, there's lots of reasons that content really just doesn't hit right with your audience. One of those reasons can be because diversity or inclusion weren't part of that overall equation. It just didn't connect with the right audience. So diversity inclusion throughout the entire creative process helps to ensure multiple points of view are represented and that content reflects the society it's trying to engage. There should be a focus on demographic diversity, and students tend to get this: age, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, culture. They understand that part, but I talk to them about broader diversity as well. Diversity in knowledge, so backgrounds, experience, extracurriculars, all of that plays into how the audience is going to perceive that content. So we discuss that a diverse campaign in PR is, again, more than just creating content that represents people from different backgrounds. It's beyond that. A diverse campaign, an inclusive campaign, focuses on truly understanding customers, truly understanding an audience, understanding their culture, understanding that journey. Varying viewpoints help connect with audiences and really help to focus on finding ways to tell different stories in really engaging ways. So I have students talk about representation and campaigns that that really resonated with them. And this is always an interesting discussion, and students tend to really enjoy this part because it inevitably brings up the fact that while many brands tout diversity and voice their support of diversity and inclusion, essentially, again, talking the talk, as we would say, few of them actually walk the walk. And you see this somewhat happening in the fashion industry and the makeup industry right now, and diversity and inclusion on their boards. So I have them look at those conversations and really think about those conversations. Then we move to talking about very specific or pointed campaigns. So the first one we talk about campaigns that are an utter failure. And I change this from year to year because it never fails that there's some brand that makes a very visible, cringeworthy statement, advertisement, social media campaign, etc. I mean, lots of different things, but it never fails that there's a lot to pull from here. So you'll see that the example I'm using is a more recent one, and it's from Ancestry. And it ran as part of a social media campaign and even a more traditional television advertising campaign. So it's kind of twofold there. The content completely missed the mark. The ad depicts a white man in clothing from the 1800s, holding out a ring to a Black woman and asking her to run away with him, escaping to the north to be safe in a place across the border. As you might imagine, if I could see your faces, I'm sure you can imagine, the backlash was swift, calling out Ancestry for essentially romanticizing slavery. You can see the comments down here at the bottom of the screen, and I love this tweet. I pulled this tweet from Melissa Murray, who's another professor, and she's saying a lot of the things that we're all thinking, right? Was she a slave? Is this a real story? Was she a slave, right? What focus groups did this run through? Who was on those focus groups? Wasn't there a better way to tell this story? Again, all of the things that a lot of us, I'm sure, are thinking, there has to be a better way to have done this. There was additional backlash as well. Again, as you might imagine, pointing out all of the things that should have been part of that overall conversation before this campaign really reached the public, and certainly just was not part of that conversation. In class, we talk about how the campaign came across as tone deaf and how the apology here is right in the center. The apology was very flat and very canned. We're sorry if we offended you. We'll try and do better, but we need to tell these stories. Very canned, very kind of formulaic, really didn't address the overall concerns. So we talk about how in class that diverse voices really in the early planning phases here could have identified how audiences may perceive this negatively and could have looked at some of the backlash that was received and really alternatives to bridging the past and really talking about stories from our history. This also inevitably allows students to bring up other examples of tone deaf kind of campaigns. They always talk about H&M's Coolest Monkey in the Jungle campaign and how that one was tone deaf. And also Dove's ad showing a Black woman turning white after using Dove. So those always come up. Those are examples that I know students are going to bring up because they were such big media examples. So I'm always prepared to have those conversations with them and talk through each of those particular campaigns as well. It gives us an opportunity to discuss the importance of understanding the audience and the context of your content, how it is going to come across to that audience. Once we exhaust those conversations, we move to talking about positive examples. Now, I will be honest, the positive examples in these types of campaigns are a little bit harder to find. They're there, but you have to look a little bit harder to find really good quality examples. Hopefully that will start changing and those positive examples will become more prevalent, but I find that that's a little bit trickier to locate. So I use this example because I like this one and I think it's a really good example. It's an Everlast campaign. It's called the Be First campaign, and it gives us a lot to discuss. So during its first week, this particular campaign went viral with nearly 500 earned media placements and really significant social engagement. So it's a campaign that's really got a lot of attention and for the right reasons. So it launched with a short film on Patricio Manuel, the world's first transgender professional boxer. And it didn't stop there. So it continued to build content for different audiences. So it built some content for International Women's Day, telling the stories of women carving their own paths in the world of professional boxing. So again, it took one area and then continued to build content. So students and I discussed the messaging and how the messaging here was created for lots of different media outlets and the importance of that. So we talk about content that was created for national news outlets or men's lifestyle outlets, sports, advertising and marketing trades. So lots of different outlets, and that the content was essentially continually evolving to meet the needs of different audience segments and how that really worked well. Once we finish the discussion, I have students break into small groups and reassess campaign messaging. So I have them look at those negative campaigns again, now that we've talked about the positives. And I have them really start to look at that messaging. They reimagine content. I have them reimagining content, recreating content, and presenting it along with information on targeted media outlets and different audiences. So they get an opportunity to really sit in the driver's seat and recraft or reposition these campaigns. It allows students to think about the importance of diversity and inclusion in a context that allows them, again, to craft and be creative and also apply all of those concepts. We do this in intro because I want those lessons to span into other courses. So even if they're not PR students, even if they don't continue down a PR path, it's something that they can think about. And again, having that ability to reimagine what has been done and apply that to different coursework and different classes along the way. The final assignment, and I know we're running a little short on time, so the final assignment I want to address focuses on simulations. Now, unfortunately, there's not currently a strong simulation on the market for an intro to PR course. But as Stu mentioned in his presentation yesterday, Stu's working on a PR simulation to give students an opportunity to really enhance some of their skills. And I think it's going to be a fantastic asset to a lot of our coursework. Since I don't have anything from that sim to talk about, I really want to focus on Mimic Social and how I use that in my Fundamentals of Social Media course. That, again, is an intro social course. So as an entry-level course, it's a course that brings in students from a variety of different backgrounds, PR to sports management to even healthcare. So again, it really spans the variety for my students. And a key component for success in today's PR and marketing environment is really knowledge about having knowledge and experiences with the digital nature of marketing and communication. And this allows that. So students really need classroom training along with applicable experiential learning activities. So something that they can apply. Mimic Social is the closest thing that I've found to obtaining that practical experience with formal and informal strategies. So it lets students really dig in. So I've taught the intro course a multitude of different ways, but when I teach it with the sim, students enrolled in semesters that included that sim really perform better on quizzes. They comment on my evaluations that the courses felt more student focused. They had a lot more to talk about. Instead of just me leading discussions, they wanted to contribute. They had so much more to say. Their content connected with things that they were expected to know in their internships. And again, that's internships across a variety of industries, not just PR. Students felt connected to the class and really connected to the overall content. And their scores on any of their tests really reflected that. I also make it a competition to provide a small reward. Again, it's amazing what students will do for a gift card to the top 3 performing students. And I find that they really enjoy comparing themselves to what other students in the class are doing. Another thing I like about simulations, and you'll notice I like reflection. I talk a lot about reflection and thinking about what you're doing. The sim allows that. Now, I'll be completely honest and tell you, this is probably the student's least favorite portion of this. They don't like reflection. They don't want to think about it. I like reflection. It forces them to think about why they made specific choices. But as an instructor, it allows me to see where they're struggling. It allows me to see that thought process, and I can adapt my discussions to those different areas. So whether students will admit it or not, it allows them really to adjust their strategies in areas where they fell short. So those are of my 3 assignments, again, focusing a little bit on relationships and diversity and certainly sims or strategy. So I'll turn it back over to Alisa to finish things out.
So it looks like we have a whopping 1 minute before we need to take some questions anyways and finish up. But our quick sales pitch on our intro book that we're working on, because so many of you maybe jumped on here today because you don't teach PR as a major, but you want to incorporate it into those different classes. I think it's important to know PRSA has a certificate in public relations program that's built for programs like that maybe your student got a degree in marketing, but wants to, took enough intro to PR or PR classes that, that they don't necessarily have a degree in it, but they could earn that certificate in PR. And so this book is really written for not only it's written obviously for an intro, but also to those standards that are set in place so that they could use this book as kind of that guiding factor for that certificate in public relations certificate that they could dual up in a major. And we're super excited, as Jamie mentioned and Brad mentioned at the beginning, that the simulation that will come with this is super exciting, because in PR it's tough. It's tough to teach some of these activities, and especially if you're not teaching specifically a PR course or curriculum. It's tough to get this stuff in and get those skills taught to those students. So the sim will really help with that and will accompany this book nicely in teaching some of those basic fundamental skills that we want public relations practitioners to have once they graduate from our program. So be on the lookout for that. So we're super excited. But if we have any questions, I know we don't have much time, but Brad, if we have a couple questions that we could take quickly, we're happy to do so.
Yeah, first of all, great job on your guys' presentation. Some really good projects there. Just a quick reminder, we do right after this have our networking sessions, so definitely go and jump on those. It's a really good way to meet a bunch of different teachers and professors just like yourself too, and just try to share some experiences. So we'll just take like 2 or 3 minutes for some quick questions. The one Kimberly asks, so she has a lot of international students. What tips could you give for making a PR assignment more global?
I started to answer this for you, Kimberly, but then when I hit send, I didn't know I had a word limit, and it said only you can see your comment because I went way over the word limit. So I just real quickly, I just said for my assignments in particular, I find that the international students that pick topics that are more, if they do a brochure about something from home, or if they do a podcast highlighting something that has, more of a global appeal and maybe something they're more familiar with back home, not only are they more interesting, but they're so educational for not only the students, but for me to just learn about some of those things that they talk about all the time, or they're dealing with all the time that maybe I hadn't, necessarily been up to speed on either. So they're fascinating when you kind of turn over the reins to them to pick that topic. I can't hear Brad. Am I the only one that can't hear?
Me either.
There you go. Sorry about that. So Alisa, this was a question that came on when you're talking about your podcasting assignment. But Julie asked, what are some podcast topic examples that you have seen?
Because I do it I give them the option of PR or social media. Pretty much anything goes. Anything can be tied back to social media or PR, I'm convinced of. But some of the really interesting ones have been, and this is just from the spring semester, I played volleyball in college, so it's always interesting. They did the volleyball coach and how they incorporated social media into college athletics at that level, and that was fascinating to me, just because I had a personal interest in it. But I've seen it done on different businesses, different firms, different. A lot of them pick the social realm because they're not necessarily PR majors, so they don't even know what that consists of. But it varies. I just let them pick their own topic. So like I said, for an international student, I had one from Finland that did a Finland firm that did PR over there, and how it was different from what we were teaching in our PR classes, which is, again, just fascinating, just different tweaks and different things of how they go about dealing with media and those types of things. So it's always educational to hear, and 5 minutes isn't enough time to get really down and dirty with what expand that topic. It's just like a little hint of like, you need a whole series to really get into some of these topic choices that they go forth with.
Awesome. So we'll take one last question real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. So David also asked, do any of your assignments discuss global PR situations that I might use for a global marketing and communications course?
I think with a relationship assignment, I think students can do a lot in terms of finding practitioners that are global and really start to get information that way. So I think that assignment really fits nicely there. I think trying to really understand, especially from a global perspective, students need that background. So really having them find practitioners and really interviewing practitioners, getting that content is important to them. I think that will oftentimes help them garner a more global perspective. Same thing with diversity as well.
Perfect. And then so Jamie and Alisa, if anybody has any other questions, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Mine would be my email, which is just simply a-agozzino, that wonderful last name, 1G, 2Zs, @onu.edu.
Mine is email as well. It's jward29, because apparently there are a ton of others before me, at emich, so emich.edu.
Perfect. Yeah, no, Lisa, you just dropped your email address in the chat. Jamie, if you wouldn't mind dropping yours in the chat as well, that'd be awesome. So we'll go ahead and wrap up the session for today. Once again, right after this, we do have the networking sessions. You can get to them by going to the home screen, and it's about the 4th tab down, and it just says networking, and you can join there to talk with other professors. We really appreciate Jamie and Alisa. We appreciate your time today, and hope you guys have a great rest of the conference.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks.